Just a question for all three of you. What do you believe about the inerrancy of the Scripture?
The Bible was given to men inspired by God. They wrote down exactly what He told them to put down. They used their words, but it's inerrant. There's no change in it. We have translations that we use to make it a little more readable to the current trends in life. I mean, we're not necessarily King James speaking now, Elizabethan and all that. But the heart, the core of the Bible, is inerrant. It's given to us to live.
I also believe totally in its truthfulness, and it is correct. And I think that while it certainly isn't a scientific document by any stretch of the imagination, I just kind of wonder at the folly of the scientific world that wants to try to prove something out of it is incorrect or false. So I just think over time, even those guys are starting to figure out that there really is something to the universe and the way it was put together. And I think it's, there's going to come a time when we're all going to know it's true. And I'm looking forward to that day.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The Bible has been around for a long time. And it's got many different versions that are variations. But the true Bible that has withstood the test of time, it is 100% real. And again, like Dave said, the people that are trying to disprove the Bible, they will learn in time that it's the truth.
How do you see your role as a deacon in the church?
As a helper, as a servant, in any way that is needed at the time.
Yeah, I think that's the principal characteristic that, they came and asked me, and I said, whatever you ask me to do, pretty much as long as it's legal and ethical. And I kind of got a chuckle out of them about that, but that's, I think, one of the key things. Well, there are a lot of things that deacons want to be, but that's true of all of us as Christians. And I think the distinction I'm making is, as a deacon, my service to the Lord and to this church just has to go kick it way up, a lot. So that's what I think is a key characteristic is, having, again, a loving spirit and serving those hands and feet.
In the New Testament, the first deacons were chosen and selected to take the pressure off of the ministers, the apostles, so the apostles could do their job and not have to do all the background stuff. That's what we are for servants.
Okay, gentlemen, this will be the last question, but I would like for each of you to tell me a time in your life when you have had to depend on God. Describe your dependence on Him, if you would.
That's the question I was raised on. That's the hard one. There have been some times in my life where I've had some things just totally fall apart. I lost my home, my car, my house, family, everything. But being a Christian, relying on Him, the pain was there, the hurt was there, the tears were there. But through every bit of it, there was a peace. You can't take away that peace. There's only one source for peace, and that's knowing that He's there with you all the time.
Looking at that question, the thing that dominated my mind was, when is there a time I'm not really dependent on Him? There have been, and I've mentioned it before, and all of us go through this. There are times when we kind of walk away a little bit, we forget about Him. But I've always been, His Word and His will as I understand it.
In my early life, raising the children, you know, like we've said before, we're always dependent on God. You may not always know it because He's living your life and doing the things that you do, but there are mistakes that people make. There are mistakes that children make. That there's nothing that you can do but help them out, be there for them, and pray that God is going to take care of them in their lives in the long run. So that's what I would be. That would be the issue, or that would be the area that I've needed God's help on the most, is the raising of the children and making sure that they are okay and that they will make the right decisions in life.
I am thine, O Lord, I have heard thy voice, and did told thy love to me. But I long to rise in the arms of faith, and be closer drawn to thee. Draw me nearer, nearer, blessed Lord, to the cross where thou hast died. Draw me nearer, 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 blessed Lord, to thy precious bleeding side. Consecrate me now to thy service, Lord, by the power of grace divine. Let my soul look up with a steadfast hope, and my will be lost in thine. Draw me nearer, nearer, blessed Lord, to the cross where thou hast died. Draw me nearer, 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 blessed Lord, to thy precious bleeding side. There are depths of love that I cannot know till I cross the narrow sea. There are heights of joy that I may not reach till I rest in peace with thee. Draw me nearer, nearer, blessed Lord, to the cross where thou hast died. Draw me nearer, 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 blessed Lord, to thy precious bleeding side.
Well, John and David and Bruce, I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be able to be a part of your ordination, how excited I am that you are going to be part of the Deacon Ministry here at First Baptist Church. And I thought about what to say to you during this charge, because you always want to say something that's not been said over and over again. And as we ordain you this evening, there's one thing that I would like for you to remember. There's one thing that stands out, I believe, about being a deacon. And this is what I want to remind you of this evening, and that is that character matters. When you are at home alone, character matters. When you are sitting at your computer and no one else is around, character matters. When you are choosing what to watch on television, character matters. When you decide how you're going to conduct yourself at work, character matters. person that someone can depend on. Character matters. And when you serve God's church as a deacon, character certainly matters. John Wooden, the longtime basketball coach at UCLA, used to tell his players, he would tell them to be more concerned with your character than with your reputation. Because your character is what you really are, while your reputation is merely what others think you are. Character matters. People get elected into office based on their reputation, but God calls you into his ministry based on character. And again, I say character matters. If you were to take all that the Bible says about being a deacon, you would notice that the Bible says a lot more about the character of a deacon than it does about the actual function and role of a deacon. And while that is there, the majority of what we read actually speaks of the character of a deacon. And what that tells me in reading the scriptures is that the character and the moral, upright character that you display is more important about serving God in the church than your actual function and role is. So tonight I would like to charge you from the very passage that Brother Donnie read a few moments ago from 1 Timothy chapter 3. In verses 8 through 13, we see a list of qualifications, and these are the qualifications, the scriptural qualifications for the office of deacon. And what you will notice when you look at all of these qualifications is that they are really a list of character traits. The whole point in meeting these specifications is in doing so, it displays a certain type of character. And I want to charge you to be the kind of person and to be the kind of deacon that the Bible calls you to be. Now let me read through these for you. The first section in verses 8 through 10 discuss your character in relation to how you conduct yourself. Verses 11 and 12 discuss your character in relation to how you conduct your family. In verse 13 describes the reward that you will receive for being a person of this type of character. Now verse 8 says, likewise, deacons must be reverent. When the Bible tells you, gentlemen, to be reverent, what the Apostle Paul means is that you need to live a life that is worthy of respect. Live a life that is worthy of emulating, that other people can copy by example, that your children, grandchildren, that your church family can look at and say, this is the type of guy that I want to be. Live a life that is worthy of respect. Do not be double-tongued. In other words, don't say one thing and do another. Don't say one thing to one person and say another thing to someone else. If you've ever heard the phrase, don't speak out of both sides of your mouth, that's exactly what Paul is saying for the office of deacon. Do not speak out of both sides of your mouth. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. He says, do not be given to much wine. Back in Paul's day, they drank wine. Well, it may have been weak wine because there was problems with the water. But even with the weak wine that they would drink, he would say, do not give into too much of that, because you need to be a person of character, have a character that is not altered by the use of alcohol. Even today, I realize that the alcohol content is much stronger in wine today. That's why I would say you're probably better if you just stay away from it. But don't be a person who lets your mind be altered by alcohol or by any other mind-altering drug, because you want to be a person of character. You want that character, that godly character, to be recognized by those who see. It says don't be greedy for money. Don't be a person whose priority is to gain more in life. It is okay to want more of certain things for your family, but don't let the priority in your life be to achieve financial gain. You need to be a person who demonstrates the need for Christ rather than the need for more money. Your dependence should be on Him rather than on financial gain, and that should be demonstrated in everything from the way that you handle your income to the way that you spend money on entertainment to the way that you give to the church, everything should be a reflection of the fact that you are illustrating the priority of laying up for yourselves treasures in heaven rather than treasures on earth. Paul then tells Timothy that in order to be a deacon, one needs to hold the mystery of the faith with a pure conscience. What this means, gentlemen, is that you need to be people of sound doctrine. As deacons in the church, you are not necessarily theologians, but you are people who are looked up to. You are people who are emulated. So therefore, not only should you be of sound doctrine, you should be students of the Scriptures. You should be continually learning God's Word so that you can disciple others, and not only have a good understanding or a thorough understanding of the doctrine of God, but you should also be the type of person who obeys that doctrine. Hold the mystery of faith with a pure conscience, the Bible tells you. And the thing about being a deacon, it's not something that is laid upon you overnight. It's not something where we issue you a quiz and say, if you will just pass this quiz and answer the right questions, you can be called into deacon service. Because that's not the way it works. It says here that let these also first be tested. And the fact that you are going to this ordination service this evening is a demonstration of the fact that you have already been tested. You have all been at this church for a few years, at least. You have all served the church for many years. And after years of service and after putting your character on display for many people to see, you have been tested. And it says, let them that serve as deacons, let these people who have been tested serve as deacons, being found blameless. What that means is if you have gone through the test, if you have had your character on display to the church as you have served the church, and you have had the type of character that is shown to be beyond reproach, that you are qualified to be a deacon in the Lord's church. And gentlemen, the very fact that you're sitting here in these seats tonight shows that you have been tested and your character has been shown to be beyond reproach. And that's what it says about how the deacon conducts himself. But Paul also says something about the character of the deacon as it relates to how you conduct your family. He says in verse 11, likewise, their wives must be reverent, not slanderers, temperate, faithful in all things. So you'll notice that we have each and every one of you, gentlemen, your wives are sitting with you this evening because your wives are an incredibly important part of your ministry. You know that from your testimonies. We know that, how important your wives are. But your wives are an integral part of what God has called you to do. And your relationship with your wife shows a lot about your character as a person and as a deacon. And the very nature of a deacon is one of serving people and visiting people in times of need. And it goes without saying, there are times that your wife will be with you. Therefore, a deacon's wife is called to ministry just as much as a deacon is called to ministry. And it says that they need to be reverent, as the deacon is reverent. Have a life that's worthy of respect. Don't be one that slanders. Don't be one that is easy to anger. And be faithful in all things, trying to show glory unto the Lord. But not only does it matter what your wife's attitude is, it also matters what your attitude is towards your wife. Now, Paul says here in verse 12, he says, let deacons be the husbands of one wife. Now, this is a controversial phrase. It's one that's disputed in the church. And there are many different ideas of what this means. There's much concern about our English translation because it reads literally the husband of one wife. So the idea is, for some people, if you are a single man, then you're not qualified to be a deacon. Or if you are a divorced man, then you are not qualified to be a deacon because therefore you are not the husband of one wife. But let me suggest to you that there is another interpretation, actually I believe a more probable interpretation, because if we were to look at the husband of one wife simply meaning that, simply referring to marriage, then we'll have to look at it out of the context of this passage. But if you were to literally translate this, the word for husband is the very same word that is translated as man. And the word for wife is the very same word that is translated for woman. And therefore, a literal translation of this would be a one-woman man. And I believe that is the point that Paul is getting at. The idea that he is trying to persuade people about is not an issue about the number of marriages that you have or have not had in the past. The idea and the concern is more about the kind of marriage that you have now. If it's not about having been divorced or not having been married, it's actually a much higher standard than that. It's the standard of what kind of a husband are you right now? Are you the kind of husband who stays faithful to one wife and to one wife alone? Now, there was a lot of polygamy that took place in Paul's day. And so the idea of having one wife was something that was uncommon. But even putting that aside, even if you were only married to one person, being a one-woman kind of man goes much deeper than that. It means that your thoughts and your intimacy is with one woman and with one woman alone, the woman that you call your wife. Be the kind of men that are men of high character, not in only the way that you treat other people, but in the way that you treat your wife. The way that you conduct your marriage says a great deal about your character. And so does the way that you conduct your home. Therefore, Paul also says, let the deacons be the husbands of one wife, ruling their children in their own house well. The idea is if you can't take care of matters at home, then you're not qualified to handle matters at the Lord's church. And again, the idea, if you look at this list of qualifications, every one of these are about character traits that you currently possess. Being the husband of one wife, that is a character trait. Being a person who is not greedy, who's not given to wine, who is not double-tongued, and who is reverent, those describe the type of person that you now are. Before you knew Jesus Christ, and even before you came to the point that you're at in Deacon Ministry, you may not have always been that way. You probably were not always that way, because there are none of us that have been. But the fact remains that character matters. Paul does go on to say that for people who serve as deacons, who display the kind of character that he mentioned in this passage, that there is a reward. He says in verse 13, for those who have served well as deacons, they obtain for themselves a good standing and great boldness in the faith which is in Christ Jesus. And gentlemen, let me tell you that there is no greater privilege and no greater honor that you can ever receive than having a good standing and great boldness in the faith which is in Christ Jesus. The fact that you have a good standing in the faith means that your character is recognized. You have a standing before God. You realize that of all the accolades that you could ever acquire, whether it be a promotion at work or whether it be the Congressional Medal of Honor, this is the highest one of them all. There is no greater compliment that can be given to someone than saying they have a good standing and a great boldness in the faith which is in Christ Jesus. The fact that you have a good standing means that your character is recognized before God. And the fact that you have a great boldness means you stand out. You have the type of character that is not normal. It is bold. It is something that stands out in the crowd. And that's what God respects of the deacons in his church. That's why you men have been called to be deacons, and that's why we recognize that call as we ordain you here this evening. So this evening, as I speak to you, John and David and Bruce, and I want to remind you again that as you are called by God and ordained by this church in the Deacon Ministry, let me remind you that it is not what people think about you that counts. It is what you are that counts. As Paul reminded Timothy, let me now remind you, character matters. Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to come here this evening and to charge these men, challenge these men in the Deacon Ministry. I pray, Lord, tonight that they will be men and continue to be men of noble character, to be the kind of men that Paul describes to Timothy as you've called them into this deacon service. Father, we give you praise for them and for their ministry. In Jesus' name, amen.